Welcome, everybody. My name's Colby. I'm one of the pastors here at New Life, and welcome to Roundtable Episode 1. Today I'm joined by Pastor Adam from the King George campus. Pastor, what's your name? Curtis. Pastor Curtis from Calvert. And of course, you probably know this guy as Pastor Mike from our Plata campus and senior pastor. Today, we're going to talk about some of the topics that are out there in the world that are pressing on everybody's minds. And today, especially with everything that's going on with COVID-19, coronavirus, whatever you want to call it, we thought it would be great to address overcoming fear and anxiety. And I want to just get us started with some stats. Pastor Adam, he is our resident brain, and we wanted him to use that Princeton degree to give us some stats on what's out there about fear and anxiety, especially in the church. How do Christians relate to this topic?
Bro, so we are 30 seconds in and we got Princeton joke. So I want you to take one of the cameras and I'm just going to do eye rolls. I just want you to be able to focus here for that. So, but all right, so I wanted I'm passionate about talking about mental health in the church. So I wanted to give us some stats that would at least frame some of the conversation. So one of the things was there was a study in 2014 done that 1 in 4 of our congregants would be fighting some kind of mental health battle. But only about 2/3 of pastors won't speak about mental health at all from the pulpit. So there's a disconnect between what we're preaching and what our people are experiencing in mental health.
Let's stay right there because that's something that captured the attention of the Christian world not that long ago with Pastor Wilson out of California. And I mean, when you talk about mental health, folks normally think there's an assumption that the pastors, we've got it all together. But I mean, do you guys have a story maybe about maybe your own struggle or something that you would like to say about mental health as a pastor talking to the folks out there?
It is not, from my experience with pastors that we've worked with, is that it is just not uncommon for a pastor to be so stressed and feeling like they failed. You know, the way we measure success as a pastor has to do with attendance, and it has to do with giving, and it has to do with life change, and it has to do with how well you communicate. And it's kind of one of those things where don't anybody take this wrong. If you don't like the way the U.S. Postal Service works, that has nothing to do with the individual delivering your mail.
That's right.
But if you don't like the way the sermon goes at your church, that's real personal. And so for pastors, it is very common for them to have, look, for me, there's an awful lot, Saturday night's the first time I preached the sermon, and there's an awful lot of Saturday nights that I go home and I think of what else I could do for a living, because it's hard. And then when somebody in your church does, you lose someone to suicide, or you lose someone because they're angry with you and they go to another church, or you lose, horrible things like that take place. It leaves you depressed and broken. And the story you spoke about, the pastor in California, it seemed like he had the depression under control, and it seemed like he had it all together. And the next thing you know, he takes his own life. Yeah. And so he was
actually
rampant.
an advocate for mental health from the pulpit. And to see a guy like that again, outside looking in, he's young, he's got a great looking family, he's got a growing church, a thriving ministry, and then boom, he's here one day and then he's gone the next. Right. It was a wake-up call. But so you talked about the stress kind of putting together a sermon and delivering that for the first time. Can you walk us through maybe what's your process after Saturday night to Sunday morning? What does that look like?
Tears, chocolate, ice cream. No.
I do that, and I'm not even preaching.
So. No, I do. I have to unpack it, and you can't really count on everyone else to be very honest with you about it, because everybody else is trying to be nice. Nice shirt, pastor. So everybody else is trying to be nice, and so what you've got to do is, you have to hear it. Once in a while, I'll actually see if I can get my hands on the video, look back over it, or just walk through, this didn't go well, that didn't go well, and try to rework it for the next time I do it. Actually, I have to be honest, for the past years, I don't even know how many years now, we've always had more than one service. Yeah. When I go back and I only get one shot at a sermon, it makes me incredibly nervous now
Yeah.
because I feel like I don't have a chance to fix it. So I will just try to unpack that. But, those moments are the lighter moments of I think the pressure and the, the anxiety that pops up. I think the larger anxiety is to realize, as pastors, our job, as any Christians that are talking to your friends about the Lord, our jobs involve more than even just life enduring or life ending issues. Our jobs entail eternity.
Yeah.
And so the pressure of that's pretty high. Now, throw some coronavirus on top of that, and it becomes quite a thing. So.
Never thought of that as icing on the cake. But,
That was COVID-19 joke number 1.
There you
Keep
go.
track
You
of
got
those.
it. You got it.
so I want to bring Curtis in on this because I think we have kind of a similar personality. We're seemingly extroverts, bubbly,
Black.
kind of happy, black.
Tall.
Bro, we come in all shades. So, but talk about maybe your experience. I experience a little bit of anxiety anytime I have to go in front of people. And I love being in crowds, but at the same time, there's just a little bit of anxiety that rises up whenever I step out on stage. What does that look like for you?
Yeah, I mean, it's weird because I told Pastor Mike, I told him all the time, I'm an introvert. I want to be alone. I want to be by myself. I want to be alone. And we would go to conferences together, and I was always somewhere off by myself. So
Yeah.
what was interesting was when public speaking was my biggest fear. But after I had done it the first time successfully, I had done it many times not successfully, that was the first time that I opened my personality up in front of people. So it was kind of an interesting thing for me, but there's still anxiety getting in front of people, but there's more anxiety for me being around people.
Okay.
So it's just being in the crowds and being around people. But I think one of the things that we don't do well as a society now to manage whatever makes us feel anxious is we don't slow down for 2 seconds.
Yeah, that's good.
Because with everything so fast paced, I want to achieve, I want to grind, I want to fight, I want to push, I want to move forward. So if I'm sitting there staring at the wall, or if I'm just sitting there watching the sun come up, or if I'm just sitting, I can feel like I'm wasting my time.
Right.
But that's keeping me healthy. That's preserving me. That's allowing me to process anything that makes me feel anxious. And this, one of my mentors said one time, he said, writing is the doing part of thinking.
Yes.
So the more I would sit there in the quiet and I would write and I would start to untangle stuff that I didn't even know needed to be untangled.
Yeah.
It allowed me to do things that were uncomfortable or could make me feel anxious, but I could do it at a different level.
Yeah.
And I could do it without it having any kind of negative residual effects.
Sure.
Yeah. Do you mind if I jump in before
No,
we
go
keep
ahead.
going? I'm glad that you mentioned Jared Wilson because I remember my story for me that highlights this well. I remember that his suicide story and the fallout of that came a couple weeks before the King George campus launched. Mm-hmm. And I remember there was the Jared Wilson suicide story and churches coming around this mental health advocacy asking questions. And then the next day, someone else that I root this in was Dale Partridge comes out and says that you can't be a pastor at all if you struggle with mental health. There was this total kind of ban on that in ministry.
Yeah, that's historically not true.
Yeah, and so well, that's true too. But I remember sitting between these two figures and feeling a responsibility to take a break on social media from the usual hype posts of saying launch is coming and it's going to be awesome and everyone's showing up. Here's all the stories. But I remember feeling the responsibility to take a break and to say, hey, I am a church planter who struggles with panic attacks and anxiety specifically because it was an opportunity for me to, as a leader, to model that, talking about it for others, but to also take on the responsibility of some boundaries for myself in church planting. Because for me as a pastor in ministry, I don't think my mental health and struggle with anxiety disqualifies me from ministry, but it means I need to put extra boundaries to protect my own health. Because I still struggle with saying this, but it's true to some extent that healthy leaders are going to produce healthy people and healthy systems, and unhealthy leaders are going to lead to unhealthy systems. Now, there are healthy leaders in messed up situations that can turn it toward health, but I think you can't underrate your influence as a leader and your own mental health on what you're going to produce.
Sure.
And so I've felt that weight in what I'm trying to build in King George, that, man, my least favorite moments in a week are the 15 minutes before Sunday service. Because you're sitting there staring at a parking lot and saying, how many people are we going to have?
Lord, hold me in, Lord.
And so any of
So we all
my
come
VIP...
Pentecostal at that moment.
I do have to tell you, though,
Yeah.
I think enlightened leaders
Yeah.
are helpful. The fact you
Yeah.
understand this about yourself, the fact you've experienced this, does not disqualify for ministry. And I really don't know the name of the guy
Yeah.
you quoted, but he's wrong. And and so he's
It's
probably a
not
lot
important.
smarter
We don't
than
want to
me.
give him
but,
press.
Yeah.
because historically it's not true. Some of the greatest pastoral leaders in history
Yeah.
struggled with anxiety and depression
Yeah.
and huge bouts of depression. And some of the greatest names you can remember
Yeah.
in Christian history did that. But secondly, you understand what people are going through, because in the end, our job as pastors is not to put knowledge down on them.
Yeah.
Our job as pastors is to help people take the journey from being broken, from being in anxiety. And if we don't know anxiety, I'm not sure how we help them.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
You know.
That's good.
I want to bring some Bible into this. So you're talking about some great pastors throughout history that have maybe struggled with anxiety, but I mean, I hope this isn't heresy, but like whenever you would see Jesus in the midst of a crowd, shortly thereafter, often he would retreat from that.
Yeah.
And it's
That's Curtis's
Can I
wife
get a
first.
witness?
And so if Jesus had to pull away,
Right.
whether that was to rest or whatever the case may have
That's
been,
good.
I don't want to saddle Jesus with fear and anxiety, but I'm just saying, if Jesus needed to pull away at times,
Right. Yeah.
then maybe we can take a page from that and do the same.
But it's not even, because that's not a secret, right? Because people do it all the time. If you go on YouTube, I did a 30-day social media fast, and they'll document what it was like. And I was like, it's the best 30 days of my life. I felt so clear. It's like, how you doing now? It's like, not so good.
We go right back to it. Yeah.
It's like, so we know. So then why do we keep doing that? Like you said, you're aware of it, so you started to set boundaries. So what are some things that we can do to continue to do that, to set boundaries because to be a good leader, to be effective, it's not a prerequisite that you have a mental health issue. It's just that I think you're more susceptible to it if you're trying to really drive forward and you're
That's
trying
really
to lead.
good.
Right.
Yeah.
That's really good, because I think for someone that necessarily hasn't been, diagnosed with struggling with anxiety, but have just experienced it in life, like, I think it's good for us just to acknowledge the fact that that's not just for people that struggle and are clinically depressed or have some sort of medical diagnosis. Like, anxiety and fear is something that we all naturally experience in different situations. And I think one of the best things that we can do is just to stop and acknowledge it. Like, I'm feeling this way.
Right.
I'm watching the news, and now I'm being overcome with this feeling that's uncomfortable.
Well, it's because I think there's something that you parsed out there that is helpful for this conversation.
Hold on, before you move forward, what does parsed out mean?
That's you. That's
pointed
you
it
pulled
out.
Second
out
Princeton
of
joke.
Pointed it out.
Thank you. Well, just say that.
a split.
Princeton
Joke
joke
number
number
two. And so to define that, right? So somebody that is struggling with an anxiety disorder is different from someone who feels stress or feels fear.
Yes.
Because you can feel fear from what is going to happen with my finances over the coming week. You can feel fear with what is happening with coronavirus. Should we be in groups of people? You can feel stress at your job, but to be able to recognize maybe I need to seek help comes at the line of an anxiety disorder as my stress is impacting my daily life. It is impairing me in my daily life. Mm-hmm. So that's to the point, just practical examples. That is when I have to overthink the text message I got from somebody before of the million ways I'm going to reply.
Or
That
when
is,
they haven't responded to a text message.
yeah, that is driving home and rethinking every conversation I had in a day, and all the ways that somebody probably hates me from it. You know, there are cycles and patterns, and that's part of the power of this Nehemiah series that we're in, is because there are cycles and patterns that are
Shameless
negative.
plug,
Sorry.
Nehemiah, taking authority over your idea.
There are cycles in anxiety that you can get trapped in that will fuel the narratives that you want to believe about yourself, right? Sure. And so I think separating that kind of cycle that you can live with from general, I'm stressed at work, or I'm afraid of what I'm hearing at the news. Those are different categories of what to do.
Right. I'll often tell people, your anxiety, the source of your anxiety, the source of your fear is either going to be mental, physical, or spiritual. By mental, I mean you can fix it by changing your thinking. You're just not thinking right. That happened to me today when I was at the grocery store. I'm telling you, it was crazy.
Wow.
All these people were there and always grabbing stuff. People pulling 2 carts that they filled up to take home. You don't need that many beans. Yes, exactly. You know, and so that feeds into you. It makes you think that way.
Yes.
Now I have to rub this in. It makes you think that way. You
Hands
know?
got real close to my face.
That was for Curtis.
It just messes you up. That's mental. I just need to change the way I think.
Yeah.
There is physical, which stop. Now, I'm not saying physical, i.e., somehow you need to work out or something.
Yeah.
Now, although that could be it.
Yeah.
But physical, as in, if you truly have a disorder, that might be a chemical imbalance, and medication can help with that. Yeah. We shouldn't fight or be afraid of medication. There are times when it's the right thing to do.
Yep.
Or it can be spiritual, where I just don't trust God to see me through. And so I think you've really got to unpack that, because you hit on something there. The anxiety most of us are feeling because of coronavirus, or because of needing to be in the house, or because of not being able to have church on Sunday. The stress a lot of us are feeling is it's situational, and it's mental. If we shift our thinking, we'll be okay. But some people in a moment like this, it's more and it's deeper than just shifting their thinking. They're going to need, somebody's going to have to help them. They're going to need a doctor's appointment to figure out how to get through that. And you need to know which one you are. Because if you try to treat a mental with a pill, that's called addiction.
Yeah.
If you try to treat the physical by just changing your thinking, that's called delusion. Neither one is good. So
can I insert one of our stats too that I think is helpful for that? Because there was another study that came out in 2014 that was talking about that 50% of Christians self-identified in this study believe that mental illness like anxiety disorder, bipolar, schizophrenia should be overcome solely by Bible and prayer alone.
No.
And so because that is taught, another one followed up saying that out of our people sitting in the seats, less than 40% will actually seek treatment if they need any kind of help. And so I think
I'm surprised it's that high.
Yeah.
Honestly, I mean, 40%, I was like, oh, okay.
Well, let's just take a pause and look. If that's you, go get treatment. Look for treatment. That's because, look, you cannot pray your way out of a broken leg. And just in the same way, you can't pray your way out of a schizophrenia.
Yeah.
That's going to require the medication from your doctor. Yes, God is capable of healing your broken leg miraculously, but ain't none of y'all ever seen that. And so go to see the doctor. Just don't trust God, but also understand He gave doctors their minds and their medicines for a reason. So I'm sorry, just needed to take a moment.
Yeah. I mean, I can't stress that enough. How like the things that God has given us naturally can work together when we cry out to Him in prayer. Like
that's right.
The word supernatural is just putting super on top of natural.
Right.
And so we invite God when we go into the doctor's office. We sometimes need to ask God, give me the strength and the courage to go so that I can share this.
Help me remember what to say to this doctor because I'm afraid I'll forget.
That's right.
Yeah.
And I mean, to take this to, a more personal place obviously I'm not the only black person up here, but for African Americans, no, we need more than one.
I'm afraid people are going to walk away.
There's strength in numbers, brother.
That's right.
But for African American males especially, you guys can talk about your experiences, but for African American males specifically, And when you add on in the church, there is you don't do this.
Yes.
You don't share what's going on in your life. You man up and you handle it. You take it into yourself, and then maybe you take it to God. But as a man, you should be able to handle this. And that has done so much damage in our community.
Agreed.
To men that have buckled under that sort of pressure. But it's not Bible, it's not helpful, it's not, and I'm glad to see there are starting to be, like, out there in TV and different examples of this. I was watching a show called A Million Little Things. I don't know if you guys have seen it or heard of it.
It's sad. I tend to avoid
It's
sad
sad.
shows.
It's connection time with my wife, honestly. but there's a character in there, Rome, who he's a black guy. He's married, and he admitted to his father, who's a different generation, obviously, about his own struggles with anxiety, fear, and depression. And over the course of time, you see, like, the initial response from the dad is just, son, why are you going to a shrink? We don't do that. Until the point where the father's wife dies, and now he's in a position where he's grappling with his own depression, dealing with loss, and now he's being encouraged to go and talk about, his issues. And so, like, it's things like that are out there in public media right now that are tearing down the tropes that have kind of been in existence for years.
And they are incredibly damaging. In the South, there was, being from the country, rural South, there was a lot of that there.
Yeah.
But being here now and being around a large number of African American men, it has done, I believe, far more damage and deeper damage to some people's lives. I've literally had men say to me, as a black man, I can't cry. I can't do that.
Sure.
And I'm like, if you can't do that, there's no way for you to release emotions, for you to find a moment of catharsis, and I think a lot of my people growing up felt that way. My dad, my grandfather, they felt that way. I never saw them cry.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I didn't see the kind of damage that I think I see in guys my age that have grown up in your community. So I think this is huge.
Well, it's spring loading emotion. It's taking it and I'm going to press it down and down and down. And it's going to come back out, but I don't know which way.
Sure.
It's going to come out in anger. It's going to come out in anxiety. It's going to come out in rage. It's going to come out in sadness. It's going to come back out because some of us have different thresholds for how much we can take and continue to suppress, but eventually it's going to happen. It's James 5:16. It's confess your sins to one another and you'll be healed. But because we don't do this with people naturally, because I want you to see the best version of me. I want you to think I'm cool. I want you to think I'm smart. I want you to think I have the perfect marriage and I've got it all together. So I'm going to keep this mask on as long as I possibly can. So by doing that, when I finally get the chance to go to God and I go talk to God and I realize that I can have these conversations with him, I don't even understand what a relationship means. Because relationship is synonymous with vulnerability. And if I can't be vulnerable, people can't do it with their spouses, with their kids. So if I can't be vulnerable with my spouse, I can't be vulnerable with somebody right in front of my face and really open up, then I'm not going to do it with him, most likely.
That's really.
I think that's almost like one of the beauties of the church. Like, this should be a place where people feel comfortable coming and being able to bear what they're going through, and not only cast their cares on God, but also share those burdens with one another and not have the fear of being judged for it. And I know we don't live in a perfect world, and there's always a risk of being vulnerable and someone not being able to handle that properly. But this should be the first place that folks should feel comfortable running to, and in the midst of worship, shedding tears. I mean, Jesus, in John 11, Jesus wept over Lazarus. It's the shortest verse in the Bible, but it's so powerful just to know, like, our Savior cared enough about someone and was moved to tears.
And he wept over Jerusalem.
He wept over Jerusalem as well.
But you open yourself up to get hurt more, which is why the walls start to go up, because experience starts to do that to you. I was having a conversation with the guy's name's Isaac Ben Shabbat, and he's a CEO of a large company, and we were on a trip together, and we were talking, and he's somebody that the first time I met him, he gave me a big hug. That night, he invited us to his family's house for Shabbat dinner, and he just immediately, you feel like family. And when we're sitting there, we're on this trip, and I'm talking to him, and I said, don't you get hurt a lot more than most people would? And he said, yeah.
People in.
Yeah, he said, yeah, and he said, and a lot of people leave. He said,
Wow.
but it's worth it for the ones that stay because I have a different type of relationship with them.
Wow.
He said, I have a community around me that's so strong and so solid because they know me and I know them. So it just reveals the ones that I don't need around me faster.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yes.
Yeah, that's really good. So to wrap up, kind of, why don't we have each of us just kind of go around and give maybe just one little coping tip, one little thing that maybe has worked in your life, or maybe you read it somewhere, I don't know, on how we can help some folks deal with and overcome fear or anxiety, whatever they're being faced with.
Yeah, I can start because this happened to me on the way here today. Because, I mean, one thing to warn our people is whenever you step out to lead in something or talk about a struggle that you have in your life, the enemy always wants to maximize that pain whenever you want to lead out of it. And so today I'm driving, and Abby's starting to tell me that she's starting to feel more of the pre-labor things, and she's 8 months. My wife is 8 months pregnant now, and so she's like, we're in the window. And she starts talking about labor, and I'm sitting there driving, and I'm like, feeling a panic attack coming on because I'm feeling, the chest get tight, my throat close up, like struggle breathing. And I remember in that moment, there's times that it'll just make me freeze up. But instead, some of the practical things that I'll do is to focus on breathing, focus on change conversation with her. I said, I know this is what you're experiencing. You cannot put this off, this bump that you have, but let's talk about something else for a moment. And
About to pop that.
That's probably not the best marital advice for somebody listening, but
and it's not.
go ahead. We're talking about this.
I had to fix that after that conversation. But
We'll call Pastor Aaron and set up a counseling session.
I know you're pregnant,
Yes.
but it's not all about you.
the worst thing I could say to a pregnant woman. But for myself in that moment, I needed to be able to focus on something else, focus on breathing, and to be able to then pray through and name specific things that triggered me, knowing your triggers, and being able to work through that. I mean, we have to believe in something that the Holy Spirit can minister through those things and bring it back. Because as much damage that the church has done spiritually to preventing people from taking steps toward therapy and mental health, there's got to be something that we can offer that will also, that the Spirit does in that to change us.
Right.
So
That's good. I'll just say, and this isn't to be overly spiritual or churchy, but fasting is something that has really become a tool, a go-to for me. And all it is, my view on fasting is just when I'm not hearing from God clearly, I need to declutter my life of something. And sometimes anxiety will creep into the clutter that you have around you. And you just have to identify what are some things that I'm holding on to instead of holding on to God's hand. And I mean, in moving things away, in turning off TV and stopping watching news, and a lot of times those are my fasts. It's not food. I don't struggle all that much with. Well, yeah, I do, but I hide it well. That's why I wear sweaters and things. But in my struggles, normally it's what I'm taking in, not necessarily through my mouth, but through my eyes and through my ears. And so I have to pull away from those things fairly often so that I can hear from God again and be reminded of who He says I am. I mean, that song, every time we sing that song, it means something to me in a deep way, and I connect to it because I have to constantly remind myself I am who God says I am, not what the world has labeled me or even the lies that I begin to believe. But fasting and meditation and prayer, I mean, those are spiritual disciplines, but they can surely help because they've helped me.
Talk to God like you would talk to the friends you wish you had.
That's good.
that's really good.
That's good.
That's good.
If you had the perfect friend that that listened well, that you fully trusted, that you could bare your soul to, that had all the answers. Talk to them like that. That's all.
Well, as a certified, actually licensed control freak,
I thought you were
I thought he had a certification, man.
I like being in control of things. I think one of the main things for me in dealing with anxiety comes when I face things I can't control. So this verse that I pulled up here in Philippians says, "Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God, and the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and minds in Christ Jesus." Used to hate that verse because it says, "Do not be anxious about anything." Well, who does God think He is?
Yeah.
Right. Does He think He's in charge? And if He is in charge, can He take this away? Because I'm really upset and I don't know what to do, and He tells me just not to do this. And I feel that, right?
Yeah.
I prayed and it didn't work. Yeah. But what he's really saying here is, because we got to remember, this is Paul writing to the church in Philippi in a time when the church is under duress, when the church is under attack. And what Paul is saying is, you can't control all these things. Mm-hmm. And when you finally come to settle that you're not in control of this and you can't be, then you can begin to rest in the arms of the one that is in control of it. Sure. Curtis is a great example of this. We've traveled together overseas a few times, and I have this control thing when I travel with a group, that if anybody that's traveled with me has had this happen, I have to be in the back of the line because I'm constantly going to do head counts and know where everybody's at.
Nobody can ever find me.
Right. This one will disappear everywhere. I mean, we're
really
overseas.
easy in a crowd.
It's just gone.
Yeah.
It's just gone. And I finally had to decide. I finally had to come to grips with two things. Number one, he's traveled a lot. He knows what he's doing. Number two, I can't control that. And so Tina would ask me sometimes, because he was traveling with both of us, and Tina would say, "Where's Curtis?" And I was like, "He knows how to get home." The peace came when I realized I couldn't control it. Yeah. That's a good example of this, but this is what I think is going on here. Yeah. In fact, that's what's going on. I think is going on around us right now. This coronavirus thing. Yeah. We have zero control over who gets sick and who doesn't. Right. We have zero control over what. I mean, choose your government official what they're going to decide. Yeah. We have zero control. We have zero control over what travel companies do or other companies. We have zero control over any of it. So all we can really do is lean back and rest in the arms of the one that's actually in control. Sure. And I know that sounds like cheesy preacher advice, but it's the best I got right now.
But the peace comes after I've spent that time in prayer, and I've spent that time, all my fear, all my anger, all the crying, all the doing the work. Once that happens, after that comes that
the peace that transcends all understanding. Everybody else is going, "Why aren't you freaking out?" And you're like, "I just don't need another bag of dried beans. I'm good." I don't need another pack of toilet paper. It's gonna be all right.
And so the one piece in there that I think is so key is it talks about with gratitude. Yes. Mm-hmm. I think that's important to remember in a time like this now. Right. Like, I've got to remember that I'm not in control, but God is. Right. Yeah. And if He's consistent, He's the same yesterday, today, and He will always be the same, then I can sometimes find solitude or strength from, "God, you've gotten me through some things before. Right. Yes. Right. You're going to do that for me now." Like, I got to have gratitude when I think about the goodness of God, when I think about what He's done, then that gives me a peace and kind of settles the storm that's raging around me. Right. And maybe that's a word for somebody, that needs to hear that today. You're anxious, you've got all kinds of issues, you're watching the news cycle, and I mean, it's true. All hell has literally broken out around the world, but there's a song that we sing that talks about the world is shaking, but I will not be shaken. Yes. And sometimes you just have to make a declaration like that. It's not to say I'm living in a delusion and I'm not aware of reality, but I can make a declaration in the midst of what's going on. Remember that Jesus, when He was in the midst of a storm, spoke peace to the storm. Yes. Right. And for somebody maybe watching or listening, that maybe that's a word for you, that you need to take a moment to declare what it is that you want God to do for you. In the midst of your fear, in the midst of your anxiety, be gracious and have gratitude about what God has done, who he is, and declare what you want from him. And it says the God of peace,
That's right.
will comfort you. He will guard your hearts and minds in Christ Jesus. So, hey guys, that is it for us for episode 1 of the Roundtable. Stay tuned. We're going to talk a whole lot. There's awesome topics that are going to be coming up here. And we're going to air these every morning at 6 a.m. or at least Monday through Friday. So stay tuned for what's coming up next. And we will see you guys next time.
We'll see.
Yeah.
You always love